Awakening from the Earth's cold embrace is unlike anything else you've ever experienced. You once heard another of your kind describe it as something akin to being born out of the soil, crafted as if by a god into a form of flesh and, well, blood. Like some kind of creation myth, a creature given life by a divinity far beyond its limited understanding. You're not particularly religious and you don't enjoy poetry, but that comparison always stuck with you. He always had such a creative way of talking about things. He would tell you stories about Ennoia too, the supposed founder of your clan. About her connection with all living things. About how your blood carried the blood not of the first mother, that is to say Eve, but of Lilith herself. It's a pity what happened to him, you think as you brush off some specks of dirt from your sportswear, stretching your arms and legs in a routine you've still not quite shaken. He was one of those who answered Xavier's call back in the 90s. You didn't, because you had a job to do. That job, cleaning up a significant breach of the Masquerade during your brief stint as a hound for the Sheriff of Frankfurt, had you pissed off majorly back then, but it saved your life. Sometimes you regret not giving old Jackal the finger and leaving for the woods of Upper New York like your clanmates had. At least then you wouldn't be so fucking lost all the time. It takes a little while to relocate yourself. Dawn was almost breaking when you went into the soil, and now everything looks and smells different. Finally, you force yourself to alter your eyes, and suddenly it all becomes crystal clear. Combining it with the myriads of smells in the air, and you find your way back to the campsite without any problems. It's off-season, so the only campers and trailers here are those of the locals, who also live here all year round. Your beaten-up old Honda Civic is where you left it, the car too old and ugly to be interesting to any of the myriads of junkies and teenagers who scour these kind of places for an easy bit of cash. By one of the campers, the owners put up a picket fence, going the extra mile to make things look a little bit more homey, and to keep their dog in. The mutt runs up to the fence and you freeze for a second, but she doesn't bark. Instead, she just looks at you, ears perked up, mouth closed, tail at attention. She's watching you, waiting for you to do something. Dogs don't have a lot of blood in them, and somewhere deep down you chastise yourself for even thinking of draining the poor creature. Instead, you simply meet her stare, reaching into her mind, and turning it off for a moment. She relaxes visibly and gets that look on her face you've seen in countless animals, a kind of vacant expression devoid of any real presence. It'll last long enough. Sneaking over the fence and past the mutt, you notice that the trailer door is unlocked. The owners clearly thought that their dog would be enough to keep people away. You only take as much as you need before you head back to your car, scratching the dog behind her ears and releasing her from your spell. The smell of her owner's blood on your lips makes her heckles rise and she bares her teeth at you, growling. You snarl back at her and she keeps her distance, but she doesn't stop staring your way until your car leaves the campsite. The Gangrel have an almost mythological status amongst the kindreds of the Camarilla, and for a good reason. They are secretive, reclusive, and are capable of surviving situations unthinkable for other kindred. They are rumored to be able to wrangle the lupines, to traverse countless miles of land, and survive even the harsh, merciless beams of light from the sun. Gangrel rarely involve themselves in the politics of the Camarilla, and even more they dislike the attention of others. They are travelers, rarely staying in one place for long, and even those Gangrel who have settled down will rarely do so for long. Their blood calls for them to journey, and they can only resist that call for so long. Of course, their reluctance to get involved in politics is a complex matter, but generally most Gangrel find that the more snared they get in the nightly jihad of their fellow vampires, the less free they become. Boons and favors, duties and obligations, social expectations and responsibilities, these things chafe the animals, and thus they tend to be almost unnervingly simple to deal with. They prefer straightforward deals, cards on the table, and will almost always uphold their end of the bargain unless they suspect that they're being tricked. Many kindred will assume the Gangrel are simple and socially inept due to their desire to avoid interactions, but this is far from the truth. Older Gangrel tend to be surprisingly good at sniffing out lies and deceit, and should they decide to ever venture into politics, they can be merciless and efficient in their work, resembling the predators they often take the shape of. Gangrel's connotation with nature is not always because of their preference towards the wild, but rather an aversion from the complexity of society. The forest and wilderness offer far simple living conditions for them, and they also provide ample prey and room to stretch out and run wild. Of course, some gangrels see the urban jungle as just as much of a wilderness, and those who have chosen to spend their unlives in the city are often masters of traversing it, sometimes even rivaling the Nosferatu in their knowledge of tunnels and secret byways. Because of their bestial blood, a gangrel who frenzies will manifest animal traits on their bodies. Some revel in it, seeing them as marks of pride, while others go to great lengths to keep their beasts satiated to avoid acquiring these marks of shame. This trait can be physical or psychological, and could be anything from antenna to a highly territorial behavior to even a tail or animal ears, and the unpredictability of this curse has many of the clan reluctant to allow the beast to take reign. The clan of the Beast formally left the Camarilla in the early 2000s after their Justicar, Xavier, declared it so, but only a portion of the clan actually saw this through, the others ignoring the words of Xavier and continuing on as things were. Yet over time, and especially after Xavier's murder, more and more of the Gangrel have left for the Anarch movement. Unlike the Bruja, they have made no big deal out of this, and there are still a significant number of Gangrel in many Camarilla-run cities, the princes often not wanting the headache to try to figure out the allegiance of kindred who may just up and leave the next day anyway. Those embraced into the clan of Gangrel tend to be strong individuals. Strength in this case may of course be different things, but those individuals chosen to carry Ennoia's blood will often be exposed to long periods of isolation by their potential sires, and may even be abandoned for months after their embrace in order to be evaluated. Suffice to say, the death toll of newly embraced Gangrel might be a lot higher than in many other clans, but those who do end up surviving tend to have shed most of their mortal weaknesses by the time their sires present themselves and move on to the next part of the lesson. The Gangrel are some of the hardiest warriors of the clans. Their discipline of fortitude ensures that while they may not be quite the heavy hitters that the Bruja or Nosferatu are, they are able to withstand outrageous amounts of punishment before they stop moving. They can be relentless in battle, and combining this with their discipline of Protean, they can more than make up for their lack of brute strength. Aside from their ability to change their hands into brutal claws capable of causing massive damage to their enemies, many Gangrel also have the ability to adopt the forms of animals, or even mist, allowing them to traverse vast distances quickly and making them excellent scouts. Their affinity for animals manifests in the discipline of animalism, which they share with the Nosferatu of the Camarilla. The Gangrel tend more towards predatory loner-type animals than the Nosferatu's penchant for swarms, but they both value their four, or more, legged friends highly. The simplicity of animals appeal to the Gangrel, who know that they will get what they are told without any backhanded deals. Among the clans of the Camarilla, the Gangrel are most often bundled together with the Nosferatu and the Bruja. They are rarely found in the upper echelons of society, and they tend to mingle more with the outcasts and loners of humanity. That does not necessarily mean that they are chummy with these two clans. The Nosferatu may be fine, especially since they appreciate personal distance, and they are both outsiders of society, something that allows for a certain camaraderie to form, but the Bruja can often come across as annoyingly passionate and demanding. Thus Gangrel tend to only begrudgingly tolerate these firebrands, knowing that the closer they get, the more likely they are to become involved in their revolutions. The Bruja's proclivity for letting their passions devolve into frenzies lacks appeal as well, since the Gangrel generally have no desire to experience this themselves. As for the Malkavians, the Gangrel can appreciate the prophetic gift of this clan, but they avoid them as often as they can, fearing the insanity that curses the line of Malkov. Aware of what such can bring to themselves should they let their minds slip, the Gangrel are uncomfortable around those as unpredictable as the Malkavians are, and of course the lunatics are well aware of this and go to great lengths to socialize with the beasts, taking pleasure in the discomfort they cause. The Tremere hold a special place of hate in the Gangrel's heart. Their clans have been at each other's throat for hundreds of years. The Tremere having encroached on Gangrel territory, and, even worse, used the Gangrel for their experiments in creating gargoyles. To the Gangrel, the Tremere represent everything bad with the Camarilla. They are notoriously prone to backstabbing and power plays, they value their own ambitions over anything else, and they have close to no regard for the damage and suffering they may cause others. Not too far from this are the Ventru, who only earn the Gangrel's respect when they show that they value the community they so often manage. The Gangrel do not hate the Ventru, but they do not appreciate being bossed around either. Many Blue Bloods made the mistake of assuming that the Gangrel were their bloodhounds, patiently awaiting their master's command. But as it turned out, the Gangrel never had any problems biting back. They just didn't feel like they needed to. Quite a few princes have learned since the proclamation of Xavier that if they don't respect and appreciate the services of the beasts, they may find themselves defenseless once their enemies come for them. The Toreador and the Gangrel are so vastly different that there is really no bad blood between them. They simply hold values so opposed that the circles they move in rarely, if ever, coincide. Sometimes the opposites can attract, especially when a Toreador romanticizes the stoic nature of the beast, and the Gangrel in turn longs for the passionate affection they might have never experienced. But these trysts rarely last for long, and that is perhaps for the better. As for the Lasombra and the Banu Hakim, there is a mutual respect there. The Lasombra never languished under the Ventress delusion regarding the Gangrel. The ministers always knew what to expect from the Gangrel, and they respected them for it, and the beasts in turn could always appreciate good, strong leadership. Even so, there is still tension between them, because both parties are acutely aware of the fact that none of this prevents the Lasombra from trying to manipulate them. The Banu Hakim are in many ways similar to the Gangrel. They both tend towards a mercenary lifestyle and are no strangers to killing. Where they differ is of course that the Gangrel have never made a religion out of it. The Banu Hakim sees it as their mission to pass judgment on the other kindred, and the Gangrel dislike this position greatly. Thus they have never seen eye to eye on certain issues, and this fundamental difference might never be bridged. To be a Gangrel is to be an outsider. It is as simple as that, and often so by choice. This does not mean that the Gangrel are cold, cruel, or incapable of affection. It simply means that they are used to relying on themselves. A Gangrel who finds their place in a coterie may eventually warm up to the presence of others, but in their hearts they will never quite be rid of that urge to wander the lands alone, with no one but their own thoughts for company. The three grandchildren of Cain wait patiently for the time of judgment to arise. Bambi Parsons, a leader with an unbreakable will, Procyon, who has been reborn as a god amongst Cain's angels, and Dugal, whose thirst for blood is matched only by his strength of will and purpose. Their children, the Methuselah, control our every move through their timeless jihad. They are Her Satanic Majesty Dani, whose mere presence chills the heart, Maximilian S. Hardcastle, a tutor and master of the jihad, Socrates Johnson, a masterful craftsman of stories, Lauren Eason, a trustworthy ally and friend, and Alexander Kushtaria, esoteric scholar and mentor in magecraft. On the Council of the Primogen are seated Edward Reed, Ian Nichols, Raven Fang, and the Autumn Alchemist, wise leaders and of good judgment. This week, the Council would wish to thank the Elder June Pocholo for your continued insight into matters of our common interest. We would also wish to give our regards to the Ancilla Yodan, whose service to the Council has not gone unnoticed. Thank you for your support, my friend. Naturally, all our elders, ancillae, and neonates receive our gratitude from the bottoms of our hearts. Without your support, this would not be possible. And thank you for watching. Now be careful out there, for Gehenna may soon be upon us.